All right, let's do this again. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another rendition of Cigar Talk, but upon my guest's request, there will be no cigar tonight. So instead, we are kind of compromising with a Rosita, Sparkling Rosa. Sparkling Rose. So we kind of had a little bit of a compromise. Figured that would be more agreeable than me having my cigar. And I was more than happy to oblige that request. So if you haven't noticed by the little bit, this is the first actually for Cigar Talk having something besides beer or water. We have the wonderful, excellent Teacher Lena back with us tonight. So say hello, Teacher Lena.
Hello.
And as promised, the last video went off so great. Talking about the misconceptions, the rumors, the bad press that homeschooling gets. We asked Teacher Lena to come back to talk more nuts and bolts tonight about homeschooling. But before we get too deep into that, let's give this a try. So, unlike what I usually have, it's very see-through and red.
I'd say pink.
A little pink, a little dry though. Surprisingly dry for rosé. Tickles the nose. So, welcome back again, Teacher Lena. Probably didn't scare you away from our last conversation, so glad to have you back. So let's talk homeschooling. And she did request that I send her some questions ahead of time, so we sent her some questions. Not my usual style. Working on the ambulance, I kind of did more of the stream of consciousness. You just take a topic and run with it. I'm not a professional interviewer by any stretch of the imagination, so this is also new, trying some pre-done questions about homeschooling. So all right, Teacher Lee, let's talk about the nuts and bolts, how to get homes started in homeschooling. So it's just as simple, you pull your kids out of school, right, and just start reading from textbooks and math books, or is there more to it?
Well, part of that totally depends on the state you're in.
Oh, okay. Explain that.
Well, some states have different requirements, obviously, so you have to report to the state if you homeschool. You have to report what curriculum you're using. Some states have stringent guidelines on what kind of curriculum you can use and testing and that sort of thing. Michigan does not have those requirements, thankfully, so it's a lot more convenient and I guess user-friendly version.
So all the subscribers except for one are from Michigan, but just in case that one does want to start homeschooling his future kids. So pretty much are parents just out on their own to research pages upon pages of law, or is there some something out there that can kind of give them a little bit of a push in the right direction?
Oh, well, nationally there's HSLDA, which is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. For the Michigan subscribers, there's also MINCH, or Michigan Inch. And they keep up with a lot of the laws and stuff going through Lansing. HSLDA would keep up with more of a congressional, national concern for homeschooling and legalities. Benefit of HSLDA is it's actually lawyers. MINCH it has lawyers, but it's also more of a general informational action kind of.
So HLSDA would more get you compliant with the laws, where it sounds like Mitch is more of like a general resource of what's available for homeschooling.
And it's state specific.
State specific.
HSLDA is nationwide, so, and they actually have concerns, in other countries as well.
Okay. So would they be a good one if you're worried about the legal aspects of homeschooling your kid?
Yes, their website is extremely educational. You don't have to be a member to access their a lot of their resources about laws and getting into homeschooling and like what you need to teach. In most states, in every state, you should teach the core subjects. But.
Okay. So let's say I started off, I'm in a young family with a youngster who's about kindergarten age. How do I begin homeschooling, say, a kindergartner? I want to start them off. I don't want to send them to public school on day one. I just want to start homeschooling. What should how do I do that?
Well, research is always good. Um, Charlotte Mason methods are really beneficial for younger kids, especially because it's a lot of hands-on, physically doing stuff, going outside. With kindergartners, you're really not trying to teach a lot of things. You're trying to teach the alphabet and count to 30. If you're looking at some of the Common Core standards, Michigan, if you go onto the Michigan Education website, they'll actually have a list of what is expected for kindergartners to do. And you can use that as a basic guideline, but you can also buy a boxed curriculum.
Okay. Now, how much you talked about curriculums and how much do you usually have to spend, or is a typical curriculum, let's say for a kindergartner or an elementary school, a middle school, and a high schooler?
That is totally dependent on what you go with. When we first started homeschooling, I think we bought a book called Home Education, and the author's name escapes me right now, but we actually use that for K through third grade for our older two, and I think we paid maybe $40 a book, and inside the book it included all the worksheets and the activities, and it was basically you printed off the worksheet, so you copied it, and then you could use that worksheet for however many children that age you have, of course, and then most of the activities were things you'd have around the house, or you could go to the library and get all of the books in the curriculum, and which we did. You use your public library so much.
Okay. So just rough estimate though, how much do you spend a year in homeschooling for your 6?
For 6 kids in a year, well, we tried one curriculum, and when they're textbooks and like activity books and workbooks, it's a lot more expensive because you have to buy one for each child, and then they're what we call consumables. So only one kid can use it, and only once. So if you're going with that sort of curriculum, you're looking at on average about $1,000 per child. Sometimes you can get the curriculum where you have all the teaching resources and you only have to buy extra student books, and then you're looking more like $1,500 for 2 children. The program we go with is a little bit different. It's mostly living books and textbooks, which allows us to buy the curriculum once, and then we can use it for however many children as they grow into that age. So it's really expensive to start. I think it ranges in price. For a preschool curriculum is $350. For an elementary school curriculum, you're looking at more like $450 to $500, but that includes all core subjects, all the books, and worksheets. Middle school, I would say, is closer to the range of $650 to $750, and then high school, because you're looking at more advanced materials, is going to be almost $1,000.
Okay.
But what you buy for one student works for every student. So with the exception of maybe a pack of $13 worksheets or an extra student workbook, that's going to be the price for however many students in that age you have.
So you buy it once, but most like the textbooks you can use again and again and again.
Yeah, most of them you just use over and over. So, there were a couple years where we had one. So we started with Sunlight. That's the curriculum I'm referring to. We started with that in Core D. So when we bought Core D, we didn't have the previous cores, of course. So as our children grew up, for a short time, we had to actually buy 2 cores, which was really expensive. It was almost in the range of $2,000 to $2,500 a year for about 2 to 3 years until we had A, B, C, D. Now we have, goodness, cores pre-K through, I want to say, almost 8th grade.
Okay. So it does save money in the long run if you keep doing it.
Certainly, because we will never have to buy those cores again. Maybe the workbooks, if we decide to change math programs, we'd have to, of course, buy that again. But after that point, it really is maybe $100 to $200 with extra workbooks a year.
All right, very good. So let's talk a little bit about whoever stays at home, the teachers going to be staying at home. I could definitely tell that, like, if I did it, I'd definitely be questioning, like, am I qualified to be an educator? And would I really be able to teach the children every subject? I mean, is there valid validity to that concern? Is there not? How do you get around that fear of just not feeling like, because I'm not educated, I'm not trained as a teacher. So how would you deal with that? Or is that a valid concern someone needs to really look at, in your opinion?
Well, certainly there's people who have strengths and weaknesses. I am weak in math, I would say. I can teach it and I know it, but I am definitely not the be-all, end-all mathematician that can, explain every complicated or even simplistic concept in algebra or pre-algebra. But there are materials, there's tutors, there's, goodness, YouTube is now such a masterful piece. There's Khan Academy, there's so many online resources that there's really no need to feel inadequate. I think you're kind of referring to feeling inadequate and incapable of teaching it. I always try to remind people that, the people that you're trusting to educate your child still only, they still have the same weaknesses that everybody else has. Most of them begin with a bachelor's degree. If you're lucky, your child's public school teacher has a master's degree. So it's not so much do I have the education as do I have the commitment willing to. Sometimes you have to relearn things. Sometimes you have to research things. Sometimes you have to, be willing to think outside the box and find a different solution, maybe a different kind of program. We went with a math program for a year that was all computer based, that was on CDs. So we tried that because...
Sorry, you can only set the base between -6 and 6.
Because we weren't sure that I didn't feel like I was teaching well enough. But then it's not required. I do assessments, so I have the kids take standardized tests. And that is really for me, a supportive, method. Because then I can see, okay, what we're doing is working, what we're doing isn't working. Oh, we're way ahead in this subject. Oh, we need to focus more on math or science because we're scoring a bit a bit lower than I would like there.
Now, where can you go to find these assessments?
Well, they range. You can go to Let's Go Learn, and they have the Dora and the Atom. The Atom being the math portion of the testing, the Dora being the language arts, English, reading portion of the testing. They're very good tests as far as it goes, but if you're looking for a true kind of typical standardized test, like what your child would be taking if they were in public school, there's the CAT, which is the California Achievement Test. And you can get those tests from Academic Excellence. There's some other programs that sell them. You can buy the paper tests. They're like $25 to $30 a piece. You can buy an online version of the test that's timed, or you can buy an online version of the test that's untimed. Personally, I always go with untimed because I want to see exactly where they're at, and I don't want them to feel rushed.
Okay.
So
you mentioned online resources for homeschooling and educating, especially subjects you're a little weak on. I've heard that there's a bit of a debate about these packaged online, like Michigan, I know, has K through 12, which is supposed to be you can do all your schooling at home in front of a computer. I know it's a bit of a hot topic issue. What's your thoughts on that?
generally in the homeschool community, sending your child to a virtual academy like K-12, or I believe there's virtual UP or virtual UP Academy, or any of those that have a public school or even a private school teacher who is overseeing the education, in general, that's actually in the homeschooling community not considered homeschooling. That's considered schooling at home, which is public school that you do at the in the convenience of your home, but you're still being overseen by a licensed, registered, trained educator. There's other programs, more generalized, like Time for Learning, My Academy, Clever Dragons, Always Ice Cream, dozens, probably way too many to name, that are not public school based. Some of them are used by the public school, actually. Odyssey, which is part of where Time for Learning curriculum comes from, is used by public school systems to teach math and stuff like that, but it is not it's not a public school program. There are like Queen of Mary, there's some Catholic and some Christian options that are still they're not considered homeschooling because they're educated by someone else the whole time, graded by somebody else, and overseen. And some of those programs also have a homeschool option where you can buy the materials but educate yourself, your children yourself. So it's kind of a whatever works best for you, in my opinion, is the best way to go. But because some people feel they need that oversight, they feel they need a teacher to look at it and say, okay, this is normal, or this is what we're looking for. And some people feel like that's a huge imposition.
Okay. So in general, a lot of homeschoolers don't view that as homeschooling, but in your opinion, if that makes them feel comfortable to get into the homeschooling, maybe they should try that out, or is that something you think they should avoid and just jump in head first, buy the curriculum, buy the textbooks, and see what happens?
Well, I am never one to say jump in and buy all the curriculum you can find, because you'll spend tons of money on things that may not work for you. So if you feel that you need that support from the public school system to start, then by all means, jump in with the support of the public school system, but always remember that there is more freedom not to go with that route. So if you find that you love having your children at home and you're very comfortable with teaching them after 6 months or a year or 3 months with that system, maybe try, a different technique that isn't part of the public school system. A lot of people say that it's best to start during the summer, because then you can try it. It's kind of like the try before you buy. You can try it during the summer before your children are, required to go back, so you don't feel like they're missing time in school for you to try it out.
Okay.
But then you can try it and decide if it works.
Gotcha. So, I don't know if what your family structure is like, but in my house, I have a full-time job, and my wife has a job, but I would imagine that when you start homeschooling, you're going to lose that second income. You can't be a full-time mother, a full-time teacher, and have a job of any kind, right? No, you can't have a career or anything like that?
Well, actually, to start with, no, I didn't, but I know a lot of people who managed to make it work. Right now, I work 2 jobs, so it's definitely possible. I don't think it's always easy. Sometimes it has extra challenges when you work, but I don't know that those extra challenges are any different than if you had a child in public school. Like right now, I get up at like 5 to 5:30 most mornings and teach online, and then by 8 o'clock I'm done. I make breakfast, or my husband does, and then we start our day. We're doing homeschooling by 9 o'clock, and then we move on with our day. By the time I'm done with homeschooling, I actually teach college English, so then I spend part of my afternoon while my kids are doing their independent work, I'm grading college level papers. So it's hectic and it's busy, and sometimes my eyes are strained from working so much on a computer. But I can't imagine trying to waking up even earlier, trying to get my children up while I'm teaching at my online teaching job, getting my kids up on a bus, out of the house, making sure they have everything they need, and then going back to, teaching something else, or grading, only to be interrupted every little bit to go pick them up or to go do this. Plus, we have 2 younger ones that aren't old enough to be in public schools, so I would still have that responsibility anyway.
Okay. So you kind of mentioned your day. A typical homeschool day, so you start at 9, then what, you go until 4 or 5 in the afternoon? What does a typical homeschooling day consist of?
I would say a typical homeschooling day is as unique and different as every family. So some people probably don't start homeschooling at 9 a.m. I know that, when we're particularly harried or someone isn't feeling well, or even if we just have that really rare opportunity to sleep in, it doesn't happen much. But it's okay to start your day at 10. It's okay to start your day at 11. Normally for us, we start at 9, and by lunchtime we have pretty much completed history, math, science, language arts, journals, reading, almost everything we need to complete. And the kids have, we have lunch, and after lunch they go outside or they go right to some computer work. I have them work on the computers just as supplemental material. And they'll work for maybe half an hour, sometimes 2 hours. It just kind of is up to them how far they feel that they've gotten that day. And then they're done. They do some stuff independently, but a lot of it we do in sections. So I work with 2 kids while the other 2 kids are independently working on something. And then we'll switch and I'll work with the first 2 while the other 2 are maybe doing their readers or something like that.
Okay. So how is that possible? When I went to public school, we started I think at 7:30, and then we didn't get out until 3:30. But you're saying you don't start till 9, and it sounds like you guys are done by 1.
That would be an accurate assessment, I would say. How is that possible? Well, 1, there's a lot less distractions when you don't have 25 children in one room. 2, you have 1 teacher devoted to only 4 students instead of 25. So as stretched thin as maybe a homeschooling mom is or feels, I would honestly assess it as less stretched thin than a public school teacher. Plus, in homeschooling, you can go with what your child knows and what they need rather than what the state tells you has to be taught on that day at that time based on a lesson plan that somebody in a school board room cooked up. So it's not as, it can be more rigorous or it can be less rigorous. If a child masters a concept in 20 problems, there's really no reason for them to do 50. But in a public school setting, 1, you have busy work so that you can make sure that every child can reach to at least a certain minimum level. So some kids who easily mastered it within those first 20 problems are kind of stuck waiting while somebody else is trying to catch up or trying to get to that same level. In homeschooling, you don't really have that problem. You can focus on what each individual child needs without delaying everybody else. There's always something another child can do. In a public school setting, when you're doing reading, the whole class is doing reading. When you're doing science, the whole class is doing science. When you're doing something independently and maybe you're focusing with reading with 1 group, you still have a huge amount of movement. I guess I would say it's movement in the classroom where you still have to supervise constantly while you're trying to individually instruct. It's really challenging.
Interesting. You kind of talked about in our last episode about your son he was born deaf, had hearing problems, speech delays. A lot of people who I know who have children who have those special needs, they actually would fight to keep them in school because that's where the counselors are, that's where the therapists are, that's where the specially trained people are to give them help, especially almost on a daily basis. So what resources really are available for homeschooling a child with special needs? It seems like pulling them out of school is worse than keeping them in.
Well, first off, therapy in school is based on group usually. So in many regards, pulling them out of school and doing privatized therapy, while it can be very expensive, 100% it's expensive, they get one-on-one attention. Whereas in a public school setting, sometimes you have one, in our case, we had one speech therapist for up to 8 children at one time. When you're trying to correct, say, the CR sound in a word, cra, 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 and you have 8 students saying that sound at once, it's really hard to make sure that each student is actually saying it correctly. When you're able to take your child to an individualized, one-on-one therapy, that therapist is focused on that child. Just one, maybe it's a 25, maybe it's a 30-minute appointment, but they get that 30 full minutes of instruction and assistance. Whereas in public schools, sometimes that's just not feasible or possible for the system to do. Again, it is expensive, but it is worth the extra effort. For us, it was miserably driving, 3 times a week, 24 miles, one way, for a 30-minute session with, at the time, a 3-year-old and a baby. And then later on, as our kids grew up, we actually ended up with 2 in therapy for a short time. And it was driving, I think at that time, it was like 10 miles to therapy, but I had 4 children with me and then almost 5 children with me for part of it, for the same 30 minutes to an hour of therapy, where we would literally sit, and of course, I'm there with all the kids, sitting in the waiting room while the child is in therapy, which can be difficult as a parent, and it can be difficult on siblings. So something to think about, but it is worth that extra time and instruction. Also, there's amazing resources out there for, like HSLDA alone has tons of research on how to help with dyslexia, how to teach a child with ADHD, how to teach children that have reading problems, just generalized, or visual impairments, speech problems. So as a parent, you want your child to succeed more than anybody else would. So, a public school teacher wants to see every child in their class succeed, but they don't have the personal connection and commitment to work on that. And unfortunately, a lot of times the public school teachers, as much as I think they would love to, don't always have the time, the opportunity, or the ability to do it. As a parent, if you want to work on speech therapy, you can personally go and research research different methods and what you can do to help with speech. As a teacher, you can research it all you want, but you may not be able to implement everything in a classroom every day.
Okay. So we're kind of getting towards the end here, as the garage isn't heating up as much as I think you'd want it to. What's some big advice, the go-to advice you always give prospective homeschoolers?
Well, I always say do what works best for your family. Some families find that homeschooling just doesn't work. For whatever reason, it's too time consuming. They butt heads too much. I hear that they butt heads a lot, which happens in every family. I think you would butt heads whether you were homeschooling or not, but you're just around each other more when you homeschool. But it's whatever works for you. If sending your child to public school works for you, then that's what's best for your family. If homeschooling 3 of your children and sending 2 of them or 1 of them to public school is what works best for your family, then that's what you should do. If homeschooling for 3 or 4 years is, what you need, then do it. By all means, always be ready and willing to make a change, either for homeschooling or to send your child to public school or private school or whatever. So it really is individualized. I think I can't stress enough to people that it's, 1, especially with little kids, it's more about play than instruction, and 2, it really is whatever you and your child need to make it work, which might be a online option, and it might be a hands-on in the backyard doing science. It's just, that's the wonderful thing about homeschooling. You can do whatever you need to do.
Okay, and kind of along those same lines as advice, let's say you had a parent who's right on that teetering edge. What's your biggest push to kick them on onto the homeschooling field instead of back to the public schooling? What would be the big push you could give someone?
Well, I do try not to push people into it, because if it doesn't work out, then they feel like they've been forced to do something that they then regret. But if I know that it would probably be a better fit for a family, I would definitely encourage them to at least try it. When we started, we tried at nights after school and on the weekends, and we tried that for a couple of months, and we realized that our son was doing much better. Within a few weeks, he was writing his own name, and he was able to recognize his letters, and that told us everything we needed to know. That told us that with mom and dad working with him, it was working better than 2 years in the public school system, and that spoke volumes. So maybe try it on weekends, try it in the summer, and if it doesn't work out, then no love lost. You haven't lost anything by spending more time with your child.
Okay. And of course, if homeschooling doesn't work and they got to send them back to school, they're not a failure, right? Like, you wouldn't say you failed your child.
No, I again, homeschooling, whatever works best for that child. So if public school works best for your child, then by all means, public school is better for some people. It's just not always the best for everyone.
Okay. All right, you want to leave us with any closing remarks, thoughts, comments, plugs for any projects you have coming up?
Plugs for any projects?
Yeah.
I can't think of any projects.
Closing thoughts, closing remarks, best takeaway from all the stuff you shared in the last 30 minutes.
Research. I can't tell you how important it is to just look into different things, because something you think would be like out of this world never work for you, or you just can't possibly homeschool because of whatever it is. Research it. Don't be afraid to look into something different that you think, oh, I would never be able to do that, because you might be surprised at how easy it is, or how much better you feel doing it.
All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you again. We might try to pull you back for one more episode, although we know you're a busy lady with homeschooling, college, teaching Chinese kids, and all that other fun stuff. But we're very grateful you could make this work out twice now. I feel very, very blessed and very thankful it could happen, so thank you. For everyone out there, again, we're glad to have teacher Lena back here to talk about how to get started with homeschooling. So if you missed part 1, I recommend you go back and watch that one about the misconceptions of homeschooling, some of the myths out there, some general information. And it's a good way to look at a new way of understanding education, how to teach your kids. And again, we might have one more episode here talking about homeschooling. So with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful time. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you later.